Hello and welcome to the shop. I'm Jared and this is the Questionable Garage, and today's all about my rear end. This is the Questionable Garage. Today we are actually taking a road trip for most of the episode where we are building the rear end housing and just introducing all of the insanity for the back of the Triple Crown Duster. And then we're gonna get it back here, get it installed, and introduce what we're doing to stop the car. We're gonna get the brakes on it, and we're theoretically gonna be at a position where we'll have a roller. We can put wheels and tires on it and move and push this thing around without jacks, which is really exciting. So, again, guys, I'm sorry. Dwayne, put up a pun counter. We're already at 1. Listen, it's low-hanging fruit on the humor tree. We're talking about rear ends. A lot of us are car guys. We like simple laughs. Sorry. So, yeah, let's go back a couple weeks when we go up and get the rear end measured. Why am I not even a little bit mature? All right, so any race car build, any street car build, you need a rear differential. And if we're being honest, our MoParty, we don't even have the 8 3/4. We have maybe the 7 3/4. It's in a very, very adorable and just good enough if you've got a slant 6 in your car. We don't have a slant 6. We're gonna have 3 very potent V8 engines that are going to make a lot of torque, and we're gonna drive very aggressively while we're out on the road course and the drag course and autocrossing and doing all of those things. So I took a road trip today up to Mooresville, North Carolina, home of NASCAR. The America's natural sport started off with moonshine running and turned into like one of the best theatrical experiences you can come. It's all fan-centric, a ton of fun, but if they're located here, you're gonna have companies that are supporting and building race car parts. So we're at GearFX today. We have got Lucas here.
What's going on, guys?
And we've got a lot of really shiny parts. Now, we're gonna preface this at the very beginning, that this is not a required rear end for 400 horsepower.
This is far overkill.
We both were talking on the phone, kind of got just a little excited, and we checked every single box we possibly could.
This is a dream build right here. This is me living vicariously through Jared right now to be able to build what I've always wanted to build but couldn't afford it.
I really can't afford it much either, but we're here, so we're doing it now. So
that's right.
Let's go through it. Like, there is a table of really cool parts, obviously not a complete rear end, and that's because you need measurements.
Yep.
And that's why our little baby rear end is kind of dirtying up the shop a little bit.
That's why you're here. We're gonna pull some measurements here in a minute, but for now, we're gonna talk about all the fanciness we've got here. So, in a normal GearFX build, we typically do a lot of stuff for high horsepower street stuff. Jared, obviously not exactly super high horsepower, but car's gonna get the snot beat out of it. So we wanna build the absolute best we possibly can. So these are our 2 most popular cases for NASCAR. So this was used in old Cup stuff before they went to the new generation. These are 2 different types of materials. So this is what you would normally see in like a normal Ford 9-inch. This is nodular iron, and then this is what we call investment cast. So this is actually steel. And also, obviously, just like Jared said, everything's thinned out, everything's machined down to save as much weight. This is about 7 pounds lighter than a normal nodular Ford iron case. That's a big difference.
Yeah, it's huge. Like, again, you can't really, see weight, but like that's substantial effort to grab.
Well, I mean, you can just see just in the thickness right here. I mean, just the webs everywhere.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Will you stand it? it doesn't even stand up as well. There we go. So we've gone for as lightweight as possible without sacrificing strength. Now, horsepower-wise, if I was building a drag race car more than 1,000 horsepower, we would do this. That's about the limit, is 1,000 horsepower.
Yeah, 1,000's about what the max that we would want to push this. So if you put the Hellcat motor in it, you know, that's a different story. But this is normally, we're happy. We've got customers running these up to 1,500 horsepower with an Eaton True Track, and they're more than happy with them. They hold up great.
All right, next on the table. Well, this is just the standard. This is the pinion support.
This is, yeah, so this is the Ford Racing SVO pinion support. This is a steel pinion support. It is a Daytona, so it uses a larger inner pinion bearing than what you would normally get. Great oiling. It's got great oiling down here. It's actually got 2 slots machined. So this works very well. We use this in 90% of what we build.
And that just, it lives in the front end.
Yep.
And then you hear a ring and pinion. So this is a ring gear. This is a pinion gear. And what is special about these ring and pinions?
So this is actually an off-the-shelf ring and pinion that this is straight out of our rental fleet. So part of what we do here at GearFX is we actually support a couple of truck teams for NASCAR, and this is one of the ring and pinions that has been used in NASCAR before. This is actually just coming straight out of our rental fleet. So this has been
That's
REM
already
polished.
won at Daytona.
Sure, different ratio, but yeah. So this has been REM polished. So REM polish is a chemical super finishing. So if you think about it as peaks and valleys for the surface finish, this just shaves the peaks off. The oil does a better job, keeps things cooler, a lot less friction. And then the big cool thing about this is, you can't quite tell, but this actually has a hex machined
If you
into
move your
it.
finger, we might, well, we'll try. There we go. It's got a little hex key in there. It's not for setting up with an Allen key.
Nope. That is for a gear-driven pump. So this pump actually sits on top of the pinion. Let's see if I can do this without knocking anything out. It actually is driven by the pinion. It gets bolted to the case.
There's your pickup with beautiful little wire work.
Yeah, this is just like a you know, like a small version of like a normal oil pump for a car. And then this will actually feed and force oil to a cooler, and then gets drained back in as cool oil back into the housing. So you're running high speed, sustained high speeds. I know Jared likes to do that. Keeps everything nice and cool and happy.
Next, this is our center differential. Easiest way to picture why you need a differential, if you took a coffee cup, laid it on its side, tried to roll it, and how it turns as it's rolling, because of the different circumferences, when you're turning, wheels need to turn at different speeds. The problem is, if you have an open differential, you don't get to have any fun, and all the power goes to the path of least resistance, and you spin one wheel.
So this is the Detroit locker. This is actually straight out of another race gear. And so as you can see, it's scalloped out between the bolt holes to save some weight. And what we're actually going to do for Jared is, because his car is doing a very specific thing, we're actually going to tune the springs in the locker accordingly to make sure the locker, well, one, it locks, and two, the biggest thing is it unlocks when he's using it on the street.
Lockers, when they're not tuned right, will bind and pop. Sounds like you're blowing up all the time. Like it's
pretty much.
It's
clicks,
rough.
Bangs, pops. I've heard people breaking axle shafts as the locker, you know, unloads
really
somebody
too tight.
Oh, yeah.
I can actually see that. Like they bind, because if it's under a lot of power, certain things they work better. But it's like when they're just cruising along, they're not very good at that.
Yeah. So this will help us handle street driving a little bit better, and we can tune this. So these are 78-pound springs. We're going to try that first. We can go to a lighter or a heavier spring depending on Jared's preference.
And what's really cool about our setup is it's really easy to pull that pumpkin out to get access to it, because normally you've got to pull axles, which pulls axle flange, brakes. There's a whole lot of things you have to do in order to do that, to get it out of the housing. We don't have to do that.
That just wouldn't do for us.
That's our axle shaft.
Yeah, so we're going to do a full floater, courtesy of Detroit Speed, our sister company. And so this is what we call a DSE Corvette C6 floater. So this actually uses a C6 Corvette hub with a custom machined billet housing end. And that allows you to use one, off-the-shelf Corvette C6 brakes, and two, you can get your axles out way easier.
This gets welded onto an axle tube, which this is the center housing, which will also get drilled for the oil return from our pump.
That's right.
And then, underneath this cap, come on, there we go. Underneath that cap, you can see that axle just goes right through like an old half shaft would. So, with my wheel, I don't have center caps. If I needed to pull a rear gear, I can just undo this, pop this cap off, you thread a bolt in there, and your axle slides right out. So if I had multiple gears, in theory, I could do 15-minute gear changes. That's just kind of a cool, totally unnecessary thing.
Completely overkill, but it's great.
Yeah. What we're going to do is we'll clear the table. Then we're going to go through and talk through some of the measurements. If you're ever building or sending off to get your own rear end housing made, you need to make certain measurements, and you may not understand when they're talking flange to flange, pin to pin, flange to pinion. We will go through that whole process so you'll know what you need to do if you're getting a custom rear end housing made, and then we'll do a quick little tour of the dyno and a couple other things, and then I actually will be going home and then coming back, and we'll run this rear end on a dyno so we know it's good, right?
That's right. Yeah, we're going to run it in on our gear dyno. You guys will see that pretty soon. It's a pretty cool piece.
All right, like I was saying, there are gear axle housing. If you ever ordered an axle shaft, you've seen one of these forms, and it can kind of get a little confusing. There is just all kinds of numbers, measurements, and terms that Lucas is going to walk us through, so that way, hopefully, you can call it and order and get your own.
No pressure.
So the first thing we're actually doing is we're setting up the housing and zeroing it on the leaf spring perch so we can get the pinion angle.
That's right. Yeah, so easiest way to do it, most cars don't have completely flat leaf springs. Typically one eye is higher than the other. So the easiest way to get your pinion angle is just set your housing on a set of jack stands. This is one of our housing carts. It doesn't have to be one. But set it on jack stands, have a buddy help you. A floor jack typically helps hold things up. And then you're just going to set these at 0, and then you're going to measure what your pinion angle is. This is an intercom angle gauge. You don't have to do anything fancy. You can get one of those little dial type ones from Harbor Freight for $5.
Yeah. And then you set that straight.
I went on the wrong side of you there. Yeah. So we're going to call that, because the yoke's dirty, we're going to call that 8 degrees up, which is about right for an A-body MoParty.
Yeah. Kind of, honestly, a lot of cars kind of run something similar-ish to that.
Yep. Yeah, pretty much. Most cars with leaf springs are going to run somewhere between 6 and 10.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to do 8 degree up pinion angle as a note. We're going to do, and those are spring under axle, which most cars are, but you never know. If you get a truck, you got to note it.
And then poor International Scouts are spring under, so we have to cut it all off and convert them to spring over.
Just like Jeeps.
Yeah, so you get some ride height. So, all right,
That's right.
So that's done. So next will be flange to flange.
Yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to do axle flange to axle flange. Now, in the case of Jared's setup, we've got these actually kind of cool looking brake drums. But we're going to measure from the brake drum, and since Jared has different brakes with different rotor hat thickness, we're just going to essentially go from wheel mount surface to wheel mount surface and then work inwards.
Otherwise, you'd need to know the thickness of your brake rotor or drum, and also some of these measurements are just super commonly known. So if you're ever confused, reach out. The axle company is probably going to have information. They're not going to promise you it will fit, but you run a straight edge out on each side, so he'll grab that.
Straight edge. So these are just literally a couple pieces of scrap aluminum that we've got. It's just a piece of T material. You can use angle iron flat bar as long as you know it's flat. You can use drywall squares, anything pretty much to be able to go to your brake drum or your axle flange. So in this case, Jared and I are going to do this, and if you'll hold the tape measure and butt it up against. So we are at 57, and if I do that, 57 3/8 wide. So now we're going to measure for the pinion location, driver to passenger side. This one's offset to the passenger side, but we don't know how much. So what we're going to do is, Jared's going to hold there. Big thing you want to do is you want to make sure you're pulling square. And then, okay, we are 29 3/4. This is not an easy thing to do by yourself. I want to make that known too. This is something that typically you need a buddy to help you with. So we are 27, we're 27 5/8. So that'll end up, I believe, 27.625 plus 29.750, 57 3/8.
Now we've got housing flange. A lot of these measurements apply mostly to ordering custom axles, but if you're ordering a housing, you'll need that. Because we're getting a custom housing made with the floaters and everything, we don't need to take those measurements. But if someone was taking those measurements, you would need to have the wheel drum off. And basically what you're trying to get is the offset from your bearing housing end, which is this section here. That is your bearing housing end. So you can get those numbers made so you can get the proper axle. But right now, I will leave you guys to build me a rear end housing.
That's right.
I will leave you a rear end housing because I don't want to deal with that anymore. And I'll be back in a couple days, and we'll run it on the dyno. Well, guys, that was like a couple seconds for you. It's been, I think, just over a week, and we are back at GearFX, and we are in the dyno room because we promised you you're going to get to see gear run on the dyno, but because of time, we don't get to see my gear run on the dyno. We're back at GearFX, so that also means, hi, Lucas.
So first off, welcome back. Even moving magic was about 2 seconds. It's been about a week.
So you guys have been busy. You got a housing built. You've got a gear built. You've got pumps installed.
That's right.
We're doing the final stuff, and we're getting ready to assemble it. And then I've got to race 3 states away and get it installed and measured for a drive shaft today as well.
Yes,
so,
you got 2 weeks to get a car running. You got some work to do.
right now, they've got a just standard modular 9-inch center section installed that they were getting ready to run on the dyno. So we stopped what we were doing to run in here because we wanted to see it. It's kind of a cool thing. And you said basically the process when you're running them in and shimming them to be quiet, you start off just running it, unload it.
Yeah, so we'll set it up on the bench. We've got pinion depth checkers, and we'll set backlash up exactly the way we would normally do it in a perfect world. We'll go ahead and check a pattern in 3 or 4 different spots. Then we'll put it on the dyno and then listen to it just the way it is. And the big thing with 9 inches is just because you got a perfect pattern doesn't mean that it's going to be quiet. So that's where the dyno really comes in handy. So you'll actually see this one's already done. It's already quiet, but just for the sake of it, just so everyone understands. So what we'll actually do is we'll spin this and sound check it, and then we will actually crack these bolts loose on the pinion support, and the pinion shim actually goes in. You can't really see because I'm standing on the other side.
Yeah.
But we will actually adjust pinion depth on the dyno and see how it affects noise.
So, well, first off, you've got your decibel meter. So does that just kind of sit over here normally?
You'll actually put it into the back of the housing, and we'll take measurements at the cover and just in the room in general. And that'll help. So this is a big thing here. You'll stick this in here. This helps with frequency. So, and that's actually something to note. 9 inches, it's not necessarily a volume thing. It's sometimes more of a frequency thing. So if you think of a car, like your car, it's going to have subframe connectors, a cage, really stiff chassis. You're sitting right in the middle of a tuning fork. And so what will happen is it sends that frequency up the frame rails and it hits you right at the base of your head, and that's when you get migraines. And so sometimes you can have a gear on here that will be, our limit's typically 102 decibels, absolute max. We like to see it not even touching triple digits, but you'll have something that's maybe low triple digits, 100, 101, or even 98, 99, but we call them howlers. And that's when a ring and pinion gets replaced. We're just not happy with the performance of it, and that's when we'll redo it to get it to where that frequency is also not there.
Well, let's get it going because we also have a lot of building to do.
Yes,
So who knew there was so much that could be done to a rear end? So as it's coming up to speed, one thing you'll hear, there's a slight high-pitched whir. That's just the electric motor. Nothing you can do about that, but...
So we'll get a shot of the decibel meter here, and I'll shut up.
There we go.
Quite a bit different between the room and the cover. This will pick up a lot more noise when you're right here.
Right.
All right, so now we're going to spin it up to 70 just so you guys can hear what it sounds like. This is a quiet one.
Yeah.
This is a good one.
That's cool. This room's cool too.
I love this. I love the dyno. It's my
But
favorite thing.
I was gonna say, unfortunately, we can't just play with fancy stuff. We've got to actually
we gotta
build.
get to work.
We got to build a really cool rear end.
Well, I guess let's get started then.
Yeah, let's go out there and get everyone caught up with what's happened. Oh, so that's where my stickers went. So once you get the housing prepped, one of the first things you need to do is get all of the oil seals pressed in, and that's what you can see Lucas doing here. And once the oil seals are fitted into the housing, it's time to go ahead and fit the floater ends. That's where floater housings are very unique, that an entire bearing assembly bolts on without an axle shaft. You have the hub pressed in, and it does not rely on anything from the axle to help support it. pile of parts to what actually kind of, looks like a rear differential. We have got the DSE housings fitted. The welds, they look pretty good, a little bit better than I probably would have done with the MiG.
They're better than I can do.
So that's quite nice. And then, again, we're doing a leaf spring. I imagine most people probably are just doing, 4 links and stuff. I don't know how many leaf springs you still do.
This is one of the very few that I've done that is a leaf spring, and we're doing a floater. And I think this might be the only one with a floater and a pump and all the bells and whistles on it.
And then also in the housing, we've got, this is our vent. Sorry, that's for the vent, which all differentials will have. That is their fill, the drain down at the bottom. And then this is for that cooler return. The pump sends fluid off the front of it, and then that is where we come back and you actually angle that to hit the ring gear to help cool it off.
That's right.
And then soon we'll get to pull the ring gear out.
Oh, the gear's done. It's gonna come out. It's glorious looking. It's pretty cool.
Well, it wasn't you. Everyone else has been handling my rear end.
Yeah, pretty much. Everyone's got their hands on your rear end.
So, this thing, it looked cool in pieces. My rear end is a little strange. Ring bolts, they're not gonna come undone. Beautiful, beautiful safety wire job. We got our pump down there, and that's gonna discharge through the front. So this is coming out looking absolutely absurd. So, consistent with everything about the Duster, it is just way too much nice. And we're putting it in a 1970 Duster that is barely held together with hopes, dreams, and a little bit of weld.
That's right.
A lot of weld.
I can see the clickbait title right now. Banned from NASCAR? These parts are going in an awesome Duster or something like that.
Oh no, we'll just stop with my rear end's banned from NASCAR.
There you go. You and the rear end jokes.
I'm sorry, guys. It's just too easy. Well, it's doing us no good here. We'll come over real quick. If you're ever putting a 9-inch together, some people run them dry, some people run a ton of silicone. If you have a good gasket, the most important thing is silicone around your studs, because this is a press through. Some are screw in, some are bolts. If you have bolts, I'm really sorry, because that's going to be absolutely miserable to line up your rear end, like getting it in there. But oil can and generally will weep around the studs, so that's where you really want your silicone, just to keep your rear end from leaking. But we're at the point where we slam that in.
That's right.
We knock the ends in and then load it up pretty much.
Yeah, we're pretty much ready.
Nice.
So, and then you get it hanging in the car and figure out your brakes and drive shaft, and you'll have a roller pretty soon.
Well, look at this. It is now fully assembled. It's not painted just yet. Nothing against powder coaters. It usually does take like a week, and we don't have a week, so I said I'll take it raw.
We're in a time crunch, so yeah, you're gonna clear coat it, paint it, whatever you decide to do. So we left the housing tag off just to...
So that way if I finish it, then I can add my serial number and have it official. But thank you for being accommodating. I'm looking forward to running this thing hard. It's not gonna have an easy life. So I think he kind of built it for that.
I want you to abuse this to the fullest extent of your abilities.
Again, information below, GearFX. I can help you out with just about any stage rear end, but they really are good with the 9 inches from normal to extreme. So.
Ford 9-inch, 12 bolt, Ford 8.8. 9-inch and 12 bolt are our bread and butter, but we can do pretty much anything. You can send in your stuff existing, and we'll rebuild it for you as well.
So, perfect. Thank you, guys. I need to hurry up because I got a lot to do.
You got 2 weeks.
All right, we're done with the puns, and we are all about the brakes now. We got back from Mooresville, and I got the rear end hung in real quick because I had to get some measurements, and it was just a matter of, you know, I drove 500 miles yesterday, and we just got it installed so I could get the drive shaft. Guys, working on what we need to actually propel the vehicle under power, but we need to be able to stop it. And that's where I've got a lot of really good from Baer Brakes. All in front of us is everything we need to get the brakes on the car. We've got our C7 floating spindles in the back. We have got our Mustang 2 style front end kit. We've got the brackets. We've got a master cylinder, which the Coyote really scares me. I stuck it in there and I know it's gonna fit with the Gen 3 Hemi and it's gonna fit with the LS. The Coyote's a different story. We're just gonna have to find out later. We have got a lot of really pretty machine brackets. We've got to get it all bolted on, but first, I want to show you the calipers. You have lots of options in caliper size. We went with 6-piston, and we didn't just go with 6-piston. We picked probably the most bright, obnoxious color we could go with. Those of you who know my name will understand why. We went with bright bubblegum pink. Because why not, you know? Getting passed by a 70 Duster that is completely covered in rust and looks like that with bubblegum pink calipers, it just makes the whole thing even more fun for me. So yeah, let's get this car lifted up and get some brakes on it.
Here we are fitting the rear brakes on the rear end housing, and I quickly discovered there's 2 different DSC floater housings, a C6 and a C7. Had a 50-50 shot, and apparently I got it wrong. So not being able to make progress in the back, we go ahead and head to the front where we get everything lined up. We get our brackets bolted on, torqued to spec. We fit our bearing housings exactly how they describe. Then we set the brake caliper in place with the brake rotor on, and we follow the measuring process where you want to make sure everything is centered. When you're retrofitting onto old Mustang 2 parts, there can be a lot of variance, so they have you measure and prepare to shim the caliper to make sure it's centered on a rotor. Being that this is all brand new stuff, we measured perfect and needed no shims at all. As always with brake hardware, you do want to torque it. That is one of the few things you really don't want coming apart when you're out driving hard.
All right, so as you can tell in that last GoPro clip, we have the car on the ground on wheels and tires. This is it's a big moment. We are pushed back away from the lift. I need to tighten up front preload a little bit, and we're gonna move the rear spring to that upper mounting hole to drop it down a little bit. I never thought 285s would look so tiny back there. From measuring, I think a 335 could go back there. I don't have it in the budget to buy new rims and tires. So we are gonna rock our Nittos on our Koenigs that we're borrowing from the ISF. And I'm over the moon. We are rolling now. That is a big, major, just absolutely important piece. The next thing I need to do is get as much to all of the weight in the car as possible so I can measure rear shocks and get those ordered and wire and fire up the Hemi and pull the Hemi out and put the Coyote in and put the LS in. So next episode is just going to be one really big one where we are going to get the interior together. We're going to get a dashboard. We're going to get brake pedals. We're going to get an accelerator pedal. We're going to get a clutch pedal. We're going to get all the bodywork back on the car. It's going to be a lot. We're going to have a mega episode next time that hopefully ends with a Hemi roaring into life. And then we got to fabricate the Coyote and the LS. So big, big progress. I appreciate you guys, as always, hanging out with us as we have some fun in the shop, building cars that have no business being built, but we're having fun doing it. So I'm Jared, reminding you guys to always make questionable choices. Keep up on your electrolytes, especially when you're sweating this much. No need for heat stroke and hospitalization. Nothing slows a project down quicker than that. We'll see ya.